Well, good morning, good evening, good afternoon to all of the principals, administrators, and teachers who are taking time out of their day to watch this video. I want to thank you very much for that. The lesson I'm going to be teaching today is called Prisoner's Dilemma. And the reason why I chose Prisoner's Dilemma is it's a concept that is a little outside the box, but it has a lot of real-world applicability. And secondly, the reason why I chose Prisoner's Dilemma is because on its face, it's kind of a hard, difficult concept to understand, but it's actually pretty simple. And effective teachers are able to make difficult concepts easy to understand for students, and that's something I hope to demonstrate here today. With that, I'd like to go ahead and get started. First, I just want to go over the lesson objective. The objective is that students will understand Prisoner's Dilemma, they will identify the Nash equilibrium, and they will be able to analyze Prisoner's Dilemma's practical application to the real world. Right? Got to have practical application. That's what makes it more fun and interesting. All right, so let's go ahead and start. We got two people here. We got both Al and we got Bill. Now, Al and Bill love robbing banks. They love it so much that they decided to rob a bank on the same particular day, but at different times. Now, Al and Bill were not working together on this particular bank robbery. A couple of things to keep in mind here is that both Al and Bill don't know of one another. They've never met. And it's very fair to say that they don't even know of each other's existence. Now, Bill hits the bank, we'll say at 1 p.m. And Al hits the bank, we'll say at 4 p.m. Alright, so they robbed the bank at four different times of the day, doing so independently of one another. So we just want to illustrate the point here that both Al and Bill here are not working together. Now, unfortunately for both Al and Bill, they do get arrested, and they're taken into two different rooms by a prosecutor, and the prosecutor's not very happy. She's pretty upset about both Al and Bill for robbing this bank. She's going to give Al and Bill 2 years for the bank robbery initially. But she starts to think to herself that there was a bank robbery that happened about a week ago. She suspects that both Al and Bill were working together in this bank robbery. So she comes to both Al and Bill, who are in separate rooms. Say Bill is in room 1, Al is in room 2. And she gives Al and Bill 4 options about this bank robbery that happened a week ago that she suspects they were working together in. She tells both Al and Bill, separately and independently of one another, that if one person confesses, that confessing party will receive 1 year in prison. But if one person confesses and the other denies, that person's going to receive 10 years. So it is kind of a zero-sum game here. If one confesses and the other denies, the denier is going to get 10 and the confessor is going to get 1. Right? So that's the second option, and let's move on to the third option. She tells both Al and Bill if they both confess, they're both going to receive 3 years in prison. Last and finally, she tells both Al and Bill if they both confess, they will each receive 2 years in prison. So, Al and Bill are given 4 options, which they can confess and they can deny. Right? So, let's go ahead and put this on this grid that I made to try to make this a little easier to understand. Samantha, what happens if Al and Bill both confess to the bank robbery that happened a week ago? Right? They're both going to receive 3 years because they both confessed. That's option number 3, in which they both confessed to the bank robbery that happened a week ago. We're not even worried about the bank robbery that just happened recently, right? We're worried about the bank robbery that happened a week ago. That's what the prosecutor is concerned with. That's what Al and Bill are concerned with right now. So let's just put that out of our mind. We just wanted to use that as a starting point of hypothetical. All right, so we have Al and Bill. Now, Samantha, what happens if Bill confesses and Al denies? That's right. Bill will do 1 year while Al will receive 10. Again, that zero-sum game, right? One party's going to win big and the other party's going to lose big. Now, what happens if Bill denies and Al confesses? Yeah, Samantha, let's stick with you. What happens if Bill denies and Al confesses? That's right. Bill is going to receive 10 years while Al is going to receive 1. Timothy, what happens if Al and Bill both decide that they're going to deny involvement in this robbery? That's right, they're both going to receive 2 years. Now, in looking at these 4 options, right, we'll call them systems. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, we got 4 systems here. But these are kind of 4 options that the prosecutor gave. Now, in looking at these 4 systems, which outcome would be the best for both Bill and Al? That is to say, if Bill and Al could sit down and talk to one another and work an agreement out, what would be the best outcome for both Al and Bill collectively? That's right. This right here would be the best outcome, in which they're both doing 2 years in prison, right? Because it wouldn't be the best outcome for both of them if one of them was doing 10 years and one of them was doing 1, and it wouldn't be the best outcome if each of them were doing 3 years in prison, right? But can anybody tell me why they think that each of them getting 2 years in prison is going to be problematic? That is to say, what is going to prevent Al and Bill from both denying? That's right, that's right. Not being able to talk to one another, right? Communication. Right? We've got to be able to talk to each other. And that's something that we can't do here because we're in 2 different rooms at the same time, and we're not being allowed to communicate and work collectively together to achieve the best outcome for both of us. Could anybody think of another problem or another reason why this scenario may not play out, in which we're both denying and we're both better off? That's right. Bill and Al may not trust one another. Mistrust. Right? Bill and Al could sit down and have a cup of joe and talk about this, and then go back into the room, hypothetically, and decide, you know what? I said that I was going to deny, but if he denies, then I can do a little bit better and get 1 year in prison, right? So I'm going to go and change my mind and get 1 year, and you know what? I don't care what happens to Bill if I'm Al, or if I'm Bill if I'm Al, I'm Bill. So mistrust is one of them. And can anybody think of a last reason why this may not happen? Why they both may not achieve the most optimal outcome for each party? Yeah, that's right, self-interest. Right? Self-interest. That's the primary motivating factor in this. Because Al and Bill both want to do less jail time. You think about it, if you're a criminal and you commit a crime, you don't want to do more jail time, you want to do less. Right? We've got self-interest, we've got mistrust, we've got communication. That's why this one right here, matrix number 4, is not going to be the outcome. Now, it might be the outcome a small amount of time, but these 3 components here are going to kind of guide us away from this matrix, and it's not going to be the most optimal scenario for everybody. Now, another reason, and most importantly, why matrix 4 is going to be the less likely outcome is because of the Nash equilibrium. This is going to tell us every single time what is going to happen in this scenario. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you what's going to happen. What's going to happen in this scenario are that both Al and Bill are going to confess to this crime. Right? That's the answer. I'm giving you the answer right there. Al and Bill are both going to confess. It's because of the Nash equilibrium. But as I was saying in matrix 4, guided by these three components, using a little common sense on why this is most likely not going to happen, we have to also apply the Nash equilibrium to find out, the answer. So let's go over what the Nash equilibrium is. The Nash equilibrium is a stable state of a system involving the interaction of different participants, right? Different participants, we got Al and we got Bill, in which no participant can gain by a change of strategy if the strategies of the other participants remain constant. So a couple keywords here. No participant can gain by a change of strategy if the strategies of the others remain constant. So let's talk about this in context of matrix 4. Now, let's put myself in Bill's shoes. And let's say that I'm denying involvement in this crime. What could I do? What strategy could I adopt to do less prison time if I thought Al was going to deny? Anybody? Jonathan, that's right. I can confess, right? If I'm Bill, I can change my denial to confession if I think Al is going to deny. And thereby, Bill will be doing 1 year and Al will be doing 10 years. So, one player in matrix number 4 can gain, right? Bill can gain. Right? And the reason why he can gain is because we're holding Al's denial constant. Right? If we take a look back at Nash equilibrium, if the strategies of the other participants remain constant, right? If Al's strategy of denial remains constant at denial, Bill can change his strategy and move his denial from a confession and gain, right? So he'll go from 1 year, or he'll go from having 2 years in prison to 1 year. So Bill can gain in that instance. Now, can Al also gain in this instance? In which Al and Bill are both denying, can Al gain by a change of strategy? Jonathan? Absolutely. Absolutely. They definitely can gain. Because Al can change his strategy from a denial to a confession if we hold Bill's strategy of a denial constant, right? So Al will be going from 2 years to 1 year, while Bill will be going from 2 years to 10 years because he's denying. So Al can gain. Now, if we take a look at the definition of this, of the Nash equilibrium, in which no participant can gain by a change of strategy if the strategies of the other participants remain the same or constant, well, we both have Bill and Al gaining by a change of strategy. So this isn't going to fit the Nash equilibrium, right? Because both participants can gain. Now, let's look at matrix number 3, in which we have Bill confessing and Al denying. Amber, what happens? Well, not what happens, but what can Al do if he's denying and Al is confessing to improve his strategy? what can Al do? Absolutely. Al can change his strategy from a denial to a confession if he suspects or he thinks Bill is also going to confess. So Al in this scenario will be going from 10 years to 3 years. All right? So he's gaining less time in prison, and that fits right within the scope of the Nash equilibrium, in which no participants can gain. So since we're gaining by changing our strategy, not the Nash equilibrium. Now what happens if Bill denies and Al is confessing? What can Bill do to change his strategy if he suspects Al is confessing? Right? He could change his strategy from a denial to a confession. And he would be going from 10 years to 3 years, which, again, is a gain if you simply do the math. So, in this scenario, Bill is making a gain, again, by changing his strategy from a denial to confession and going from 10 years to 3 years. So, again, we have a gain. So, since Bill has gained by a change of strategy, this is not the Nash equilibrium. And that remains, and that leaves us with matrix number 1, in which they are both confessing. Right? Both Al and Bill here are confessing. Now, why is this the Nash equilibrium? Well, if we look at this, in which they're both confessing, what gain can Al or Bill make by changing their strategy? Right? If I'm Bill and I change my strategy from confess to deny, well, that's going to leave me going from 3 to 10. It's not a gain, because I'm doing more time in prison. Likewise, if Al decides to change his strategy from confession to denial, going from 3 years to 10 years. So again, not a gain. And this is why this is the Nash equilibrium, because each participant here cannot gain by a change of strategy if we hold the strategies of the other participants constant. So that's why we're going to arrive at confess, at them both confessing. And this will happen, this is where we're going to get the answer all the time. But let's talk about practical application to the real world. Right? This happens all the time in society. Let's think about the United States and Russia. Both have nuclear weapons, and both want to acquire more nuclear weapons because it makes their nation stronger, right? And if you're not keeping pace with the other country in terms of keeping your nuclear arsenal up, well, then you're going to be at a disadvantage, right? So if we think about this in terms of the United States and Russia, we can go back even to the Cold War. We'll change this from U.S. and we'll change this to Russia. And if we're playing this game of arming ourselves, or of each country arming themselves, right? Arm, not arm. Arm, not arm. We can change the variables or the payoffs that each participant gets. Right? Let's say 75, 50 and 0, One thing society doesn't like is nuclear weapons, right? We want to reduce nuclear weapons. But both countries here have an incentive to beef up their nuclear arsenals because they don't want to be at a disadvantage, right? So if the United States arms and Russia arms, both, we'll say they both have their nuclear arsenals have a value of 75. And if the United States arms, but Russia isn't armed, their value is 50, while Russia's is 0. Likewise on this, U.S. doesn't arm, but Russia arms, 50 0. They both don't arm. They both have a value of 25. Like we talked about with prisoners and women, this is the most optimal outcome, right? If we worked together and we talked, we could come up with agreements to reduce nuclear weapons. And that happens in society a lot today. But thinking about this in the context of a Cold War, where we're talking about communication, we're talking about mistrust, we're talking about self-interest, this is the optimal outcome for society. But this doesn't happen because of those three factors. And instead of what happens is we end up with more nuclear weapons instead of less. So that is the practicality of what happens in the real world today, where we have countries that are trying to arm themselves and to keep pace relative with other countries, so their countries remain strong. So the takeaway from this is the practical application is that had the United States and Russia worked together and decided both not to arm, well, the nuclear arsenal would be less and we'd have less nuclear weapons in the world. But instead, we both did not cooperate. Instead, we both decided to arm and we ended up with more nuclear weapons. So that is the practical application of prisoners of women in the context of the real world. And I know that lesson was a little long, and I do apologize, but I wanted to get that in there very briefly to demonstrate its applicability. And with that, I want to thank everybody for listening. I want to thank you for your time.